Just beginning by settling into a comfortable sitting posture. We try to find a balance in posture between being very alert and upright, and at the same time, and being able to settle and relax in that posture. Balance is also very important. So just noticing how your body is aligned, as this helps you to remain still and comfortable. When we're not upright, when we're not aligned, then tends to put pressure on different parts of the body, like the lower back or the shoulders or the neck. And just finding this alignment is a mindfulness practice. Requires that you take the attention into your body and really feel how you're holding your body. And then letting any points of tension relax if you can, relaxing the jaw, releasing the shoulders, softening the belly. And just feeling the breath moving in the body. Even as we hold the body still and stable, the breath keeps moving. As with the breath, so with the mind also moving. While we have a kind of ideal of just paying attention to the breath, we need to understand that the habits of thought will tend to pull us away over and over. So our practice then becomes coming back. Each moment of returning to the breath is a starting again. When the mind wanders, the body also wanders, sometimes literally with the posture changing with thoughts. but also the sense of becoming tense or getting sensations, various kinds of discomfort that come with the various types of thoughts. You start to see how thoughts of anger cause certain feelings in the body, thoughts of anxiety or fear have their own manifestations in the body. So we start to see these connections and learn to just breathe with them and soften around them. And just by giving them space, they tend to dissipate more easily. But if we simply notice thoughts and breath, we miss this other big connection, the body and the felt experience. This is perhaps the most difficult part of meditation, perhaps of life, is to fully take in what we're feeling, open to it, allow it. Particularly for people who have intense or difficult emotional lives, to actually open to the feelings can be terrifying and takes a patient, gentle, compassionate approach. We can't force ourselves into opening. It needs to happen in an easeful way, a gentle way. As you work with mindfulness of the breath, begin to examine all aspects of each breath. So this means noticing the beginning and the inflow of breath, the end of the in breath and the beginning of the out breath, the feeling of the outflow, and then the end of the out breath. If we simply look for these specific points of sensation as the natural effect of focusing the mind more clearly and more steadily, right. Good morning again. I am Kevin Griffin, for those who don't know me. Um, and we have been, for some time, actually since last March, we've been going through my book, One Breath at a Time. Just kind of going through the steps in a sort of casual way. Um, and we have arrived at step 7. And I'm going to take a little bit of a sidetrack into another one of my books, A Burning Desire, Dharma, God, and the Path of Recovery, which is the book that was it's the second book I published, and one that was meant to kind of address the difficulties and challenges and frustrations people had with the word God and the concept of God and the 12 steps. Um, so the first part of the book is kind of defining uh, what I mean by Dharma God. So there's different elements of the Dharma that can be seen as having power, such as karma, mindfulness, wisdom, love, the Eightfold Path. I'm reading from the table of contents right now. Faith, presence, spiritual awakening, and the group, and mystery. Those are all the sort of topics I cover in the first section of the book. The second section of the book is devoted to uh, talking about each of the 12 steps that includes the word God. Those are step 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 11, uh, for those who are keeping score. So step 7 says, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Um, a Another step that has this distinct kind of Christian and biblical tone to it. This sort of I'm asking God, sort of this dualistic view, and view that perhaps that there's this thing we call God is going to somehow uh, remove shortcomings. I sort of think of it as a like psychic surgery that's going to be performed on us. God goes in with some kind of a laser surgery and finds the shortcomings and extracts them, um, which of course doesn't make any sense. So I have to figure out something else. And I'll start by just addressing the word humbly. That I think I've kind of for a long time heard this as kind of uh, crawling up to God, like, oh please God, please, this sort of uh, uh, debasing myself to God, rather than how I've come to see humility uh, as being more about honesty, like really being honest about uh, my shortcomings, my failings. So it's not so much uh, this, again, sort of not about the relationship with God, of being humble towards God, but rather just within myself having humility, and how and that I've certainly come to see that as really a vital part of recovery, spiritual growth of all kinds, and really sort of being a, uh healthy sort of person on a social level, because humility uh, is also really important in our relations with others. But I will say that when I uh, when I used to read the 12 and 12, or when I guess in the early days of reading the 12 and 12, the which is Bill Wilson's commentary on the 12 steps. The book is actually called The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions for those who aren't familiar with it. Excuse me. I I always felt sort of frustrated with the way that Bill Wilson addressed this step because he did kind of emphasize humility, as I recall. I haven't read it really recently, probably sometime in the last year, um, but I remember him, really addressing humility and never addressing the question that I've always had when looking at this step, which was, how is this supposed to happen? Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. The part that interested me wasn't the humbly part, it was the removing part. How to and if I didn't believe that I could just pray my problems away, as is sort of implied and pretty much stated in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, then how was this supposed to happen? And, and it's interesting. I mean, I would ask that question in this sort of literal uh, reading of the step, but at the same time, like anybody else who stays in recovery and grows through their life in recovery, I was doing all the stuff that needed to be done. I just didn't really quite make the connection that, you know, my shortcomings were being removed. And I think another aspect of that is that it sounds like something that just happens, you know. Okay, I did the step, shortcomings are removed, move on to the next thing, rather than just that when you first do the step, you're at the beginning of a process and that it's an ongoing and very likely, lifelong process. Um, so, so I'm just going to read the first page of step 7 from A Burning Desire, and I've given the step a title. Apparently, it says "Letting Go: Step 7," and then I have the step humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings, and then there's a little heading. It says, "Asking God to help us grow." And most of this page is taken up with the large quote, which I will be reading, but just step 7 is where we again run into the stumbling block of how God is supposed to change us. Again, we're faced with the idea of a magical process of being fixed by some external entity or force. Ajahn Buddhadasa addresses this question when he analyzes the biblical saying, "Ask and it will be given you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you." Oh, before I go on, I'm going to talk about Ajahn Buddhadasa. Because he gets mentioned earlier in the book, and he's also talked about in uh, One Breath at a Time. Ajahn Buddhadasa was a Thai monk and came out of what's called the Thai forest tradition. Um, he died, I think, in the early 90s. So he was 20th century, he's essentially a contemporary um, monk. And he's one of those people who became probably more honored and respected in death than in life, although he was very respected in certain circles. But once he was dead, it was safe. So, like somebody like Martin Luther King, it was like everybody loves him now, but Turns out he wasn't that popular in the 60s, you know. So Ajahn Buddhadasa was really iconoclastic. He didn't want to follow the kind of Bangkok hierarchy and patriarchy of the monastic world, which is a very political place. I mean, we've seen. I'm really going to digress, but it's okay because I didn't digress before the class today. So take my. I'll claim my minutes back now. Claim my time, my digression time. If you've read anything about what's going on in Myanmar right now, there was one passage that I saw in one of the stories about this coup where it said that there were like pickup trucks with soldiers and monks driving into the center of Rangoon. I think that's how you say what we used to call, like forgetting the names of all the Rangoon. I don't know. If somebody can name the capital of Myanmar, that'd help me. But you're going to do that, Jim?
Yangon.
Yangon. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Yeah. Used to be Rangoon, right? Yeah. Okay. So, you read that and you go, what? What? The Buddhist monks are affiliating with the military that's, throwing out the democratically elected government? What's going on here? Well, what's going on is that it's called power, and theocracy, and aligning with the people that will help you to maintain your power. So that's certainly true in Myanmar, and it's also somewhat true in Thailand. So I think it's helpful for us as Westerners who tend to idealize Buddhists in Asia and monks in Asia to realize that they're just human beings who are, not necessarily purists. Much like we can look at our own, Christian leaders, some of whom are, not so don't have so much integrity. But the point is that going back to Ajahn Buddhadasa, he kind of, as a young monk, he kind of saw that there was this sort of politicization of the monastic world, and that a lot of the monks in Bangkok weren't really practicing. They weren't, not only were they not meditating, they weren't studying the suttas, and this was really what the whole reason for the Thai forest tradition, which is the Thai forest tradition is based on a bunch of monks who realized, that we've kind of lost the juice here. We've lost the connection to the actual teachings, and that thus they went off to the forest and tried to live as the Buddha did. So Ajahn Buddhadasa was part of that movement. He was also known for, when I say iconoclastic, I mean that in a literal sense, because the word, if you know the word, I'm sure most of you do, many of you do, I don't know, some of you might. Iconoclasm refers to people who destroy icons, who would, in Buddhadasa's monasteries, they wouldn't have the statues and things and all the iconography that you would find in other Buddhist monasteries. Or, since I was never at one, and this is totally what I've received, secondhand information, so you can look it up for yourself. But I've also heard that he had pictures of all of spiritual teachers from all great lineages, like Christians and Muhammad and Christ and Muhammad and maybe some Hindus, I don't know. But the point is that he was really an outsider. He was a rebel, and he was looking for truth. He was looking for enlightenment, not to follow some rigid rules. And so in the late 60s, he gave a series of lectures on Christianity and Buddhism. And when I was writing One Breath at a Time, I found out about them. I did not know about them until then, and someone told me that his translator, uh, Ajahn Santikaro, was doing a new translation of them, and I got in touch with him and got to. He gave me a manuscript, which has actually never been published. So the version. So I have the version of the original translation, and then I have this later translation. But that gave me this material, which is what I drew on for a lot of my talk about God and Buddhism. And I'm just going to put Ajahn Buddhadasa's name in the chat because he's a great teacher, and he's actually most famous for his work with the Anapanasati Sutta, which is a sutta on mindfulness of breathing. So, yeah, I believe his book was called Mindfulness with Breathing. He's also famous for his book called The Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree. And Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree is about emptiness. So he's also kind of very known for talking about enlightenment in these very accessible ways. Finally, for one more reference, Larry Rosenberg's book, Breath by Breath, is based on Buddhadasa's work. He studied with Buddhadasa, and it's an even more accessible version. It's a Breath by Breath is a great meditation training book. If you really want to learn about meditation, I recommend that one. I actually was listening to a talk with Ajahn Amaro the other day where he recommended that book, which is really unusual to hear a monk recommend a book by a lay person. Okay, we almost made it through the first page of this section of the book. So we're talking about Ajahn Buddhadasa. Ajahn Buddhadasa, so I'm going to go back and read this again. We're faced with the idea of a magical process of being fixed by some external entity or force. Ajahn Buddhadasa addresses this question when he analyzes the biblical saying, "Ask and it will be given you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you." He says about this passage, quote, "From the Buddhist point of view, this too is a matter of karma. We must act. That is, we must ask, seek, and knock for God to be moved. Mere faith is not enough. Even if one sits down to pray, it still will not be enough. In this context, the word ask implies an earnest effort to bring about a desired result. That is to say, we beseech the law of karma through our action and not merely with words." Now, for those who have sat with me a lot, you've heard me particularly quote this last line a lot. We beseech the law of karma through our action and not merely with words. So this brings us back again to defining the word karma, which I find myself doing a lot. I think mainly because I think there's so much confusion about it, and people get, think of it as magical or about fate and karma, which is a actually Sanskrit word, and the Pali for karma leaves out replaces the R with another M. So in Pali, the word is kama, and not to be confused with kama as in the Kama Sutra. So Kama means desire. So the Kama Sutra is the Sutta on desire. But anyway, karma literally means action, right? So when Buddhadasa says from the Buddhist point of view, this is too is a matter of karma, or you could be saying this too is a matter of action. And he immediately says we must act, So that's the point, which of course, makes perfect sense to us as addicts. It was through our actions that we became addicted, or I don't even know if you're addicted necessarily, but that we developed these destructive habits. It's through action, through repeated action. So I think of karma as a kind of uh, it's kind of like digging a ditch, or like digging, maybe think of it as like digging a drainage ditch, you know, and you're you want the water to run off in a certain direction, and you really you dig and you dig and you say you have to dig it for like 10 feet to get it to the spot you want it to go. So you dig your ditch 10 feet, and then the water will run there. Uh, If you then put some rocks in there, it's going to run better. If you fill it with concrete, then the water's just going to flow right through there, right? So our our addiction is kind of like if or just to say the way karma works and the way we develop habits is that we do something over and over until it becomes solidified. So if you just, dig a little dirt ditch, well, the water's going to it's not going to flow through there. It's going to get absorbed into it. So it's not, it's like you didn't really develop that habit that much. You just had a drink occasionally. But as you build up that drainage ditch and finally turn it into this smooth flowing thing through repetitive action by doing the same thing over and over, it gets stronger and stronger. So it's not that, oh, I had one drink and then I had to go to AA. It took a lot of years of drinking before I needed to go to AA. Uh, this is not radio, television, or by the way, so I can break my anonymity. It doesn't. I'm just kidding. Of course, I'm breaking my anonymity. So, but it's good to remember that about everything because the same thing with meditation, right? If I just meditate once a week, it's like, oh, I'm going to dig a ditch. Okay, what that was one shovel worth. That's great. I'll go home now and take a break. No, if you want to develop a meditation practice, you have to really dig that in and put in your rocks and lay the concrete and get it to really flow. I'm not sure concrete's the greatest image, but let's not try to overthink this. You know, with everything, whether it's exercise or whether it's getting angry, if you really let yourself get angry a lot, that becomes a really strongly ditch. Maybe we should think about deeper ditches. But in any case, uh, to understand that, there's a something I think of as spiritual time as opposed to human time. With human time, we expect things to happen on a schedule. Like, okay, I did this. All right, now I want my result now. But spiritual time is about how real change, spiritual change, and I'm going to include recovery as a spiritual change, and even emotional development as a kind of spiritual change. That those things have their own uh, they operate really out of time, but they're on their own schedule. They don't sort of fit our demands of, okay, I've done this for 30 days. Now I want it to work. Now I've gone to 30 meetings in 30 days. I can stop going to AA. I went on a retreat. I shouldn't have to meditate anymore. It's they operate in a whole other kind of realm of time. And I think this is one of the things that's really difficult about, you know, step 7, having our shortcomings removed and all the broader implications of step 7 that the potential for change, the potential for growth, the potential for letting go, that it's something that requires this kind of persistence and w- working without outside of time, without outside of schedule, outside of the realm of results or end points or arrival points. Uh, and again, we might think of it kind of as like the monastic life. When you ordain as a monk, you don't ordain and then you're a monk for a while, then you get enlightened, and then you stop being a monk. Okay, I'm done now. I'm enlightened. It's a life that's taken on a way of living that goes beyond particular results that you might get. So, I've always found phrase, this closing phrase, to be particularly interesting. We beseech the law of karma through our action and not merely with words. And and it is interesting. What's particularly uh, helpful, and I think relevant for us, is that Ajahn Buddhadasa says, even if one sits down to pray, it still will not be enough. Because as we know, or hopefully, if you're familiar with the 12-step literature, there's something people call the 7-step prayer. It's not identified as the 7-step prayer in the literature, but it became known as that. And it's again, sort of suggests that I'm just going to say this prayer and then I'm going to be changed. And I don't think anybody really believes that I'm just going to say this prayer once, because the point of prayers is that they are things that you repeat many, many times, right? So prayers are much more like attempts to change our internal karma, attempts to realign our way of thinking and our view and our reactive patterns. Oh, I'm going to think in terms of this, in terms of letting go, um, but and words words also create karma. Right? So prayers create karma. They just don't work as magical. You know, send in a letter and get your reward for it. Um, so we beseech the law of karma through our action and not merely with words. I might actually come back to this uh, in the next session, but just to say that what I like about that phrase is that it's a kind of play on words, because beseeching the law of karma is suggesting a kind of action, but the word beseech is is usually meant to be a verbal uh, action, that I say something to someone, I ask them, I beseech them for their help, or beseech them to give me something, and or to beseech them to behave in a certain way. But he twists it, that I beseech the law of karma. You think, well, how can I beseech the law of karma? I can't talk to the law of karma, right? I can't beg the law of karma for anything. And then so he answers that question. We beseech the law of karma through our actions. So now you're going, oh, it's like the way that I want karma to respond to my desire or my wish or my intention. How am I going to get karma to respond to that? So I'm going to get karma to respond to that through my actions. And then, of course, this is putting karma essentially in the place of God, because this is what normally we would say, we beseech God, right? But we're beseeching the law of karma. So now we have to think about, well, wait a minute, how is how is karma like God? You know, maybe I'll leave that up there I'll leave that hanging for a little while. And I think it's worth taking a lot of time with that question. Um, so I'm gonna open it up for thoughts and comments and questions.
Kevin, can I jump in?
Yeah, please, Jim, go ahead.
Um, for me, step 7 is actually one of the clearer steps in terms of higher power. And it's just, for me, it's just the basic thing. Like, I can take all the actions, but I cannot remove my character defects. Um, there's um, some mystical, magical process that actually happens, where suddenly they are removed. They may come back, but I'm certainly not in control of that process. And so for me, that actually is a link to higher power. Whatever, however I decide to define that. The other thing is just about humility. That I there is the there is the Christian idea of humility, but to me, humility is just about being right sized and knowing where I fit in the bigger picture of things. And as a recovering addict alcoholic, that was not my, I was the center of the universe. And unfortunately, I found out, or fortunately, I found out that I'm not. So, that's been actually a gift to me to be able to find out how I fit to in the world. And
Yeah,
so that's all I got. Thanks.
thanks, Jim. So before I respond, I just want to, oh, great. Somebody is putting in the 7-step prayer. I don't have that. I, I never memorized that. One of my failings, I will humbly admit. Um, and I also wanted to mention that Joni Lane, who was on here, has a class. She's been through the mindfulness teacher training, and she's got a Buddhist recovery class happening. You're going to put that in the chat, Joni? There we go. Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So if you're interested, uh, great. Thank you, Joni. Thanks for letting people know about that. So Jim, magical thinking from you? I'm so surprised. I just, this is, I've gotten into trouble in it with, I actually got into a public disagreement with James Barris on stage one time about this question about, well, it was particularly about, getting sober, whether that could happen through so-called grace. But it's the same point you're making, which I just can't accept that. I can't accept that there's anything, if there's something that operates outside of the law of karma, that's, to me, that's basically Buddhist sacrilege to say that, that everything, the only thing that that doesn't have cause and effect involved is nirvana. And, but I don't think of that. That's not like, just like getting me sober or removing my character defects. I just think that I'm being, I'm very, this is where I'm fundamentalist, you know, that I believe that the only way character defects can change or be moderated, uh, or indeed be removed, is through some kind of karmic activity, mental, physical, verbal. I just don't think that I don't believe in grace as a sort of, I, I understand, and I use the term, like there are times when there's a sense of grace, when the way things flow, feels, even can feel magical. But if I look back at it, I've got to believe like, oh, it might have felt like that, but there was causality there. If there wasn't causality, then I believe that the world has something, there's some other source of power that's outside of the realm of causality, and that's problematic for me.
Well, I wasn't saying that it's not comma or karma. I was just saying karma is a higher power
Yeah,
among many
yeah,
billions of ideas about higher power.
right, right.
And my favorite when I'm talking to sponsees about it, I say, okay, I can let go of this pen, but it's still sitting in my hand,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and what actually removes it, you
Mhm.
know, and that's that I don't know.
Yeah. Gravity, if you turn your hand over. But
Negative gravity.
and right.
God.
And even the idea of letting go is a problematic idea, right? In that case, because when we say like I'm holding on, like where is the actual mechanism whereby I'm holding on to something, and where's the mechanism whereby I let it go? It's very difficult to kind of point to that, which is why again it just comes down to me to the persistent showing up and taking the next right action and following right intention. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Maybe one other comment here.
We have a few hands, and then there was a
Oh, there's hands. I wasn't looking. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, then let's go. Flippy.
Hello, Kevin.
Hi.
You just breezed through this little phrase I thought was great to maybe expound upon. Maybe we should dig deeper ditches.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that had a lot to do with step 7 and a lot to do with the process of the remainder of the steps in order to have those defects removed. And then it's a process. And as in, like, when I went through NA, we stated that it's a program of action, 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 action. And everything was an action. Like, once you've done this, now do this, now do that, now do
Yeah.
that. It's a definite do program. I love that dig deeper ditches, because replacing a defect with an asset would be a wonderful way. Like, that's how my atheist friends looked at this step, is what they told me.
Mm. Yeah. I was a little, as I was saying that, I was a little concerned that, digging yourself into a ditch didn't really sound like necessarily a good thing, So it was like I was concerned about where the image was kind of gonna go, but our addiction is like maybe one kind of negative ditch, and then our recovery is, I don't know if you can have a positive ditch, but or maybe it's the reverse of the ditch. The recovery is like the pile of dirt that we've dug out of the ditch that it's going upward. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm not great with
It's reversing the direction of the ditch to another direction.
yeah, yeah. And also making it like it's not just a ditch that you're digging into to like sink underground. It's maybe something that you're digging for a purpose, You're finding the gold. Anyway, it's too much. Thanks you, Flippy. Glenda, hello.
Hello. Hi. I am saying hello from Minneapolis. Just want to say that. From the Bay Area originally. And I've been coming to these classes virtually for the last few weeks, so I really appreciate that it's possible to do that from afar. You've said a lot of things over the last few weeks where I'm like, oh, yeah, that's the way that the Dharma feels when you have trauma, yeah. So I've really appreciated a lot of the things that you've said. And I actually came here today with a question. So I don't know if this will feel meaningful for you or if it will feel kind of too far from left field. But as an adult child of an alcoholic, I was really struck this morning thinking about just the first step, about powerlessness, and the way that when you're a child in an alcoholic system, you feel really powerless, but there's like there's both like a truth and a falsehood to that. And I just wonder if you could speak to like the powerlessness one feels as a child of an alcoholic, and then the powerlessness like that, you know, now that we're like we are powerless over alcohol, either ourselves or in our families, or you know, with people that we love. And also the idea of like, you know, having like the power that we do have. If you could speak to that.
Well, I don't know if I have, I don't know if that's a question exactly, or but if I don't know that I have an answer, but I'm happy to play around with a little bit, I guess. You know, I have a piece in step one, in One Breath at a Time, called Powerless, Not Helpless. And I guess as a child, you're kind of helpless. You know, you can't take care of yourself. You can't support yourself. You need other people's help. And, and when that's in a dysfunctional family system, it's horrifying and frightening. Um, and, and yeah, indeed, it puts a real kind of emotional scar on us that it takes a lot of work to change. And yeah, I was talking about this, I think, in the last class, this idea that the steps are trying to point us to finding other powers, you know, and that's and we, if we step out of the steps and addiction framework and just think about growing, you know, uh, emotional growth, emotional maturity, uh, a vital part of that, maybe central part of that, is finding our own power and finding out how to how to exercise that power in healthy and uh, you know, constructive ways. Because sometimes we can kind of find that power and use it to hurt others or and to hurt ourselves as adults. You know, we find out that we can, you know, go, you know, shoot heroin. That's like, I have the power to do that. I have the power to buy massive amounts of alcohol or to rage at people. I have that power. And it's like, oh, that's not really what I'm trying to do. It's like learning. So and at the same time, we might tend to discount our own agency in our, you know, because of those wounds and because of that sense that we carry with ourselves of being uh, of being helpless, that we can sort of internalize that so that we never really learn how to, you know, sort of take responsibility, be a functional adult who or sort of. So part of that, it seems to me, is very much waking up to what's true, just to see, oh, I do have power and this is what I have to do, because that's going to be really uncomfortable. I think that's one of the really hard things about growing into our recovery is getting comfortable with our own role as adults and responsible and empowered human beings, and having boundaries around that, you know, having skillful boundaries around that. But you know, because I never wanted to be responsible, so it was much easier to kind of like rage and then and abuse drugs and alcohol and people, and then be helpless when it came to the things that really had to do with um, being a functioning adult, because that was like, oh, I don't want to do that. So yeah, there's a lot of healing that has to happen, that has to do with just taking on the challenges of being an adult. And yeah, I wonder if having adult models who are alcoholics also sort of alienates us from the very idea of being an adult, you know. So you can see, I don't, as I said, I don't have an answer, but there's a lot of interesting questions in there. So thanks for bringing it up. there was one other hand up. I think it was Megan. If you guys, I'm still here. I'm just gonna work on my taxes after this. So, if you wanted to,
Hey,
both of
Kevin.
you guys are together. Yeah.
Hi. So I was thinking about in the seventh step, the humility. It takes humility to identify one's shortcomings and not focus on other people's shortcomings as well. And I'm new to working the steps, but my sponsor told me that step one is ongoing. And that kind of ties into what you were saying about the ongoing process of remembering, not forgetting, losing sight of my powerlessness,
Right.
and why I'm working the steps. Also, I'm looking forward to your companion book, Daily Digressions.
Daily digressions, good idea. Yeah, I was thinking I could, if I went back and thank you, if I went back through all my Zoom classes and just like took out the intro to each of them, that would be my next book. But somebody else is gonna have to write it for me because I'm tired. I know you're not Megan, but I assume, I don't know, but I think, just to respond to what you were talking about, I mean, that's kind of the overarching thing about the steps. It's good. It's great to work through the steps 1 through 12 with a sponsor, but that's not like you're done working the steps then. Really, the steps are much more about an ongoing process and coming back to the step that you need at a given time. There's a saying like, what step are you working on right now? But I think of it much more as, what step do I need to draw from at this moment? Do I need to turn it over? Do I need to acknowledge my powerlessness? Do I need to make an amends? Do I need to write an inventory? So that there's something that we can draw from in the long term. I just wanted to respond to Julie's question in the chat. As I recall, thought, including intention, word, and action, are weighted equally in karma. So it is not just the actions we take in the name, so to speak, of karma, but what we think and how we speak. Yes. Action has 3 forms: thoughts, words, and deeds. So, okay, this Friday night, I'll be on the Spirit Rock Zoom. Angela, can you pull that up real quick and stick that in the chat? So that starts at 7:15 rather than my usual 7 o'clock, and it goes on longer as well. It's a more like an hour and a half. So yeah, so it's also on my website, but that's the way you get into that class on Friday night. And other than that, I will be back here next Tuesday, God willing, and the creek don't rise. So thank you all for coming today.
Thanks, Kevin.
I know
Thanks,
God,
Kevin.
Thank you,
when I
Kevin.
say God, what I mean is if the law of karma cooperates. So just in case you were
Sure.
wondering what I meant by that.
Thanks.
Blasphemy.
Thank you, Kevin.